And President Ziegler, it does still appear that we are waiting on manager. Oh, excuse me, Manager Crafton is here. So I see all 5 managers. President Ziegler.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock, so I'd like to call the regular meeting of Riley Purgatory Bluff Creek to order. We're meeting remotely due to concerns over COVID. And because of that, I believe we have to have a roll call attendance. Mr. Smith, can you do that, please?
Yes. Manager Crafton.
Present.
Manager Duval.
Present.
Manager Cook.
Present.
Manager Pedersen. That didn't come through to me. Manager Pedersen.
You're muted.
Present.
President Ziegler.
Present.
All managers are present.
So the first item on the agenda is to, I guess the second item on the agenda is to approve the agenda. Do I have any motions on this item?
I move that we accept the agenda as written.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any questions or comments about the agenda?
President Ziegler,
Yes.
managers, under the consent agenda, I'm going to share my screen just so we're all looking at the same thing here. Under the consent agenda, item 6F, which is the after the fact permit for 2023-053 6575 Pleasant View Way. There are some questions regarding an easement on the property that need to be resolved. So that permit review period has been extended, and I'm asking that it be removed from the agenda this evening.
Mr. President.
Mr. Smith.
I just wanted to note that under item 7G for the legal counsel report, I'll be requesting that the board go into closed session to discuss the Cook versus Riley Purgatory Bluff Creek Watershed District lawsuit.
Any other questions or changes to the agenda?
Yeah, Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
I'd like to remove from the consent agenda items, well, put it this way, all of the items except for item G, as in gopher.
All except G?
Correct. And obviously, I have no objection to, what was it, F?
That is
Taking
correct.
off the agenda. So I would agree, take that 6F off and move everything from the consent agenda to action items with the exception of G.
Okay, you may, Administrator Jeffrey, you may have to remind me. I printed it out before there was an item G.
Okay. So there will just be one item remaining on it when we get to item 8A. I will list the items as they come up.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any other questions or comments on the agenda?
So,
So,
one more, please.
Manager Cook?
No, I'm fine. That's good. Thank you. I just wanted to check.
Okay, so I forget who made the motion. Manager Patterson. Are you okay with the
Absolutely.
proposed changes? Manager Duval, did you second?
Yes, I'm fine.
Okay. Mr. Smith, can we have a roll call vote, please?
On approval of the agenda, Manager Crafton.
Oh, she is frozen.
I'll come back. Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen.
Yes.
Manager Crafton, I think
As
left.
she logged off.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0 with one not voting.
Okay. So, let's see. The next item on the agenda is the matters of public interest. Welcome to the board meeting. Anyone may address the board on any matter of interest in the watershed. Speakers will be acknowledged by the president. Please raise your hand and wait to be recognized. State your name and address for the record. Please limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes. Additional comments may be submitted in writing. Generally, the Board of Managers will not take official action on the items discussed at this time, but may refer the matter to staff for future report or direct that the matter be scheduled on a future agenda. Do we have anyone from the public who would like to speak at this time?
As President Ziegler, Mr. Fisher from Duck Lake was asked to speak.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Greetings to everyone. I am Rod Fisher, 16820 South Shore Lane on the south shore of Duck Lake. And I'm here representing, among others who are participating, the board of our new lake association, the Eden Prairie Duck Lake Association. And since we founded the group, our top priority has been a lake management plan so that we can especially address a couple of top issues for us. One was lake level and the other is aquatic plants. There are others, but those consistently pop up as the top issues. And so we've been asking your board and staff for an improved or updated lake management plan. And we understand there's one proposal of a task from BAR Engineering. So we appreciate that the board is seeking this proposal. We've seen the proposal from BAR, and it's the shock of how much it costs to do a comprehensive lake management plan. Remember, it's $156,000 that they proposed. And we're afraid that that cost will mean it gets pushed further and further into the future, knowing the other obligations of the district. So we're asking that you would please consider carving out the portions of the plan that deal with the lake level as our top priority, and that's both from the board and from the members of the association around the lake. So we would ask that you, if you can, find a way to carve out the parts that focus on the lake level and obviously the outlet structure next to the railroad tracks, so that that part can be placed in action before another year passes. And hopefully we will get some rain in the next many months, and that will start to build up the level of the lake. That's pretty much what we request. And if there are any questions, we'd be very happy to deal with any of those, either directly or through email or with the board. So the section, I think it's task 3 on the proposal, hydrology, outlet modification, and resiliency is the name of that section. So again, I thank you and appreciate your time tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak tonight?
Yes, this is Tom Lindquist. Should I proceed?
Hello, Mr. Lindquist. Please
Hello.
proceed.
Okay. In the 3 minutes that I have, I'd like to spend maybe the first minute talking about some of the history. When my wife and I moved here back in 1984, We found it a beautiful lake with lots of waterfowl, but there was something missing, and that was largely fishing. So several of us, neighbors and myself, went to the city and the DNR to see if something could be done to improve that. And the DNR said that this wasn't really a public access lakes. So we agreed and we encouraged to work with the city and the DNR to create the public access that now exists on Duck Lake Trail. And that enabled what I think is an extremely important improvement that took place. The DNR approved in October of 1998 a lake management plan. It's really a fisheries management plan, but it was pivotal in bringing fishing, sunfish, crappie, and largemouth bass fishing to a high degree of success in Duck Lake. Unfortunately, that got reversed when the outlet was modified in or about 2014. That's because the average lake level dropped by close to a foot. And the DNR's concerns were that the lake be kept at that elevation level that had been historically kept for so many years. But unfortunately, that doesn't take into account the fact that the lake had lots of fluctuations up and down, and the average lake level for those many years going way back to, I think 1970, was about a foot higher than it has been in recent years. So I think it's important that we review this and hopefully get back to something like we had with that lake management plan that the DNR had put into effect. That plan, by the way, was based on their assumption that winter kill occurs on Duck Lake naturally about once every 5 to 10 years, not every single year as it has since the lake level was in effect lowered. So those are some concerns that I have. I also have some questions about the draft. On page 1, it mentions the elevation, and I wonder if the old elevation number is still valid, because this beautiful bridge causes some hydrology changes, I'm sure. And so just as a question that doesn't need to be answered at this moment, I'm concerned, is that old elevation number still valid, or is it time to reset that to something different? Also, on page 3, there's mention of some outlet options, and I wonder if one of those is the V-Weir, which has been discussed in the past. I frankly hope it is, because that seems like a logical approach. And I'm wondering also if in the long term there could be something approaching a closed loop system where sensing the water level would cause changes to be made in the weir. Perhaps this is how the Grays Bay approach works on Lake Minnetonka, but it's something that makes use of data to control things. Maybe not quite in real time, but at least within a matter of some days. So those are some questions off the top of my head. We appreciate working with the Watershed District, all of you, and I hope that we can move forward.
Thank you. Are there any other people from the public who would like to speak at this time?
I am not seeing any others, President Ziegler.
Okay, I think
Ziegler?
that yes.
I'm working with a new computer and I was just getting stuff up and there's something running in the background that seems to be causing problems. But anyway, I did want to vote yes on the agenda. I don't know if there was anything else.
Okay, we
try and set
did.
the phone number I can call in.
Well, that seems to be working fine with what you've got, other than your camera isn't on.
Well, I turned it off so it'd be more stable. At least
I guess that works.
Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you. Good to hear your voice anyway. Okay, the next item on the agenda, we did pass the agenda as revised. The next item on the agenda is the reading and approval of the minutes. And we've got minutes for several meetings here. Do we have any motions on item 4A, reading and approval of the November minutes?
I'll move the November minutes as submitted.
I'll second.
Okay, are there any questions or comments or corrections on the November 1st minutes of the regular meeting of the Board of Managers? Hearing none. We have a motion and a second. Mr. Smith, can we have a roll call vote, please?
On approving the November 1 minutes, Manager Crafton,
Yes,
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
With the caveat that these accurately reflect what happened, I'll vote yes.
I heard yes, is that correct?
On the caveat that these accurately reflect what occurred at that meeting, I'll vote yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler,
Yes.
motion carries 5-0.
Okay, the next set of agenda or the agenda, I'm sorry, the next set of meeting minutes is for the November 6th continuation of the November 1st regular meeting. Do we have any motions on that item?
President Ziegler, I move we accept the minutes of the November 6th, 2023 meeting.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any questions or comments on the November 6th continuation of the November 1st meeting minutes?
President Ziegler.
Manager Crafton.
So I have a point of information, and it's been mentioned a couple times, but on page 3, line 57, Manager Cook said 4 managers voted to approve the permit, and that is not accurate. I voted against that permit too. So just, I don't know if we need to set that straight, but he keeps referring to 4 managers, and that's not accurate. That was 2 that voted against that permit, if that's the right one I'm thinking of. Anyway, just a point of information. It's not, no big deal.
So Administrator Jeffrey, have you made a note of that so that can be reviewed and corrected?
President Ziegler, managers, I would not change the minutes as that was what was stated at the meeting. Manager Crafton is just pointing for the record that the vote was 3-2 for the approval of that permit. So, Mr. Smith, is that accurate?
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Mr. President, I'm a little confused.
Manager Cook, I couldn't tell who was talking.
What was Manager Crafton specifically referring to? I couldn't quite follow.
Let me, President Ziegler, if I may, I'll share the screen and show you the. So, what did I was just looking at? Oh, it's lines 56 and 57 where you were talking about the development and why not to vote for plan amendment. And you stated that 4 managers voted to approve the permit. So, which accurately reflects what was said at that meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So we're keeping that the same then.
Right.
Okay. Can we have a roll call vote on the approval of the, or did we have that already?
No.
November 1st. I'm sorry, November 6th continuation of the November 1st meeting. Mr. Smith.
Manager Crafton,
Yes,
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
With the same caveat, I'll vote yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, the last set of meeting minutes that we have.
President Ziegler, there's actually 2 more sets, November 16th and December 6th.
Okay, I guess there was an update then. Okay, for the November 16th work session of the Board of Managers, do I have any motions on this item?
President Ziegler, I move that we approve the minutes of the November 16th work session.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any comments or corrections on the November 16th? Hearing none. Can we have a roll call vote, please, on the November 16th board meeting minutes?
Manager Crafton,
What was the vote? What are we voting on? Sorry, the minutes?
on the November 16th minutes.
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Without waiving any of the objections that I made during that meeting, I vote yes.
yes. Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Mr. President, I would request delaying action on the December 6th minutes. I haven't had a chance to review them yet, and I would like to be able to do that if the board would indulge.
Okay, so I'll make a motion that we lay over the December 6th minutes until I've had a chance to review them and legal has had a chance to review them.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any comments on this motion to lay over the December 6th minutes? Hearing none, can we have a roll call vote, Mr. Smith?
Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the whole lake management plan overview. Administrator Jeffrey, is that something you're going to go through, or?
I will introduce Mr. Bischoff from Bar Engineering, who will be speaking on the matter. But about 6-7 months ago, when we were talking about Duck Lake, there was discussion about the numerous different issues on Duck Lake. And one of those issues at the time was the outlet. And the outcome of that meeting was decided, rather than addressing that individually, we should look at a whole lake management plan. And Duck Lake was a prime candidate, given its relatively simple, might not be the word, but simpler to model watershed. The inputs and controls are there. So BAR put together a task order. Joe Bischoff from BAR put together a task order of what a whole lake management plan would cost. That was provided to me back in August, actually, of this year. And I've asked Joe to speak on the whole lake management plan tonight. I believe, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but we could address some of those things a la carte to the earlier comments made from the public, because at one time we were looking at just addressing the outlet. So with that, Mr. Bischoff.
Thank you, Mr. President and Board of Managers. Thanks for listening tonight. So as Terry said, kind of we were tasked. Sorry, let me make sure I can advance my screen. We were tasked with kind of putting together what would it look like if we did a holistic management plan for Duck Lake. And this was, let's put everything on the table. Let's look at emerging contaminants, emerging issues. How do we tie this in with some of the other plans that are going on there? So when we looked at it, we looked at 2017, the use attainability study. This was done to put together the water and nutrient budget for the lake. And this is kind of always the basic or the meat of your management plan. Phosphorus is a limiting nutrient. We have to manage phosphorus. The UAA really focuses on that. But, there was also some concerns about the lake elevation with the outlet, as we've heard tonight, and how that might be affecting the lake ecology. Is it affecting the fisheries? Is it affecting shoreline conditions and aquatic vegetation? And how might we roll that into an overall plan. We did an initial just kind of review in 2021 of the environmental impacts, but we really thought, or we were directed to do a more holistic management plan. How do we pull all this together, thinking about all the other initiatives that are going on in the district? So the outcome was, how can we put together a scope of work that includes a holistic approach? So we're talking about water quality, vegetation, fisheries, shoreline, or even are there other potential stressors that are going on out there? Nitrogen balance, chloride, these are things that we know are having impacts on water resources, but we haven't really started to roll that into a lake management plan. So what would that look like? Well, you would really kind of start with this core lake management study. So we take that 2017 modeling of the UAA, which, by the way, water quality right now in the lake is excellent following implementation and doing that study. But we would roll this into an aquatic vegetation management plan at the same time. And so here, like, you know, it's similar. We did vegetation management plans on Mitchell, Red Rock, and Lotus. So now that would get rolled in to the holistic plan. So we do the nutrient cycling, and now we'd roll in those plants that go in there. And then we take the work that the district's doing on shoreline surveys, and we'd roll that into there. So we could get a really good sense of what how the lake is functioning from the landscape into the water and some of those factors. And then we might put together, if we have a water quality, if we have a model, right, if we're using P8, or at least we have the water balance, we can start to try to understand things like chloride. We can look at how much applications occurring in the watershed. What does that mean for the lake? Do we see connectivity? Some of these other factors. Could we look at nitrogen? Well, nitrogen is not a direct nutrient for algal growth. It is an indirect one, meaning that nitrogen can control whether it's cyanobacteria, which are the ones that can become toxic, whether it's green algae, but it also can contribute to the vegetation abundance. Aquatic plants, submerged aquatic plants, are limited by nitrogen. They're not limited by phosphorus. So we don't really understand the linkage between nitrogen and the sediments of lakes and plant abundance. Can we start to look at some of these factors? And then looking at those hydrologic impacts. It's one thing to put together the water balance to understand how the lake is functioning. It's another thing to look at what balance is doing to the shoreline and some of those other factors. And so really a big part of this plan, and part of the why the cost is so high, and again, I'm not suggesting we do all this, we put everything in there, was we wanted to spend some time really visioning out and using this as an example of what does a healthy lake look like, right? And try to understand, what does that mean for a plant community? So on the figures you see over here, we want to use a science-based approach. So these are floristic quality indices of lakes similar to Duck Lake. And we can look at pulling those lake vegetation surveys and asking the question, what species do we see in similar lakes? Which ones have good floristic quality? Why do they have good floristic quality? What would that look like for the landowners looking at a kind of cross section? And that's what we have on the top there, is if we start to envision this out, what would it look like for a healthy shoreline to flow down into your emergent vegetation and then into your floating leaf and your submerged? How do we vision all this out so we kind of understand what does a healthy system look like, as well as doing that with some science behind it? And that's where the floristic quality and some of these other reference lakes would come in. So what we did is we put a scope together that includes all these pieces. So we started with building on the current nutrient budget, and we would update this with some of the work that's being done on the wetland functional assessments, right? So to try to understand how are wetlands and the landscape interacting with the lake. And then Eden Prairie's pond inspection program. They've been doing a lot of going out and surveying these ponds. So we have really good data on what their volume is, what their sediment load is, some of those other pieces. And then we would use that budget to start to try to put a nitrogen and chloride balance together. Okay, and we would have to have some other information, but we could do things like look at applicators, ask questions about how often they're applying or to track their time, that kind of thing. And at the same time, we would update the hydrologic understanding. And this is really looking at the outlet structure. And this is where looking at the balance, updating that water balance. And Scott really would be, he can answer more questions about that part of it. But that's looking at the outlet structure. And it gives us an opportunity to look at what the balance would be under different conditions. And then we can ask the question in our visioning, how would that affect shoreline conditions? How would that affect the aquatic plant community? How indirectly might that affect fisheries if we have it in there? And then we would also add the aquatic plant management plan, right? So now this is a second plan that we've been doing separately for some other lakes. We're rolling that into this plan so we can look at all these pieces together and how they fit. And then we'd also add that shoreline and fisheries management. So it was interesting to hear about the fisheries tonight. It'd be nice to put together some history about how the fisheries have been managed. And then again, vision, what kind of fishery should this be? It is a shallow lake. Shallow lakes tend to be boom bust fisheries, meaning they have some natural winter kill. And I think it's a reasonable question that the audience asks is how frequent should that be? What would that look like? How do we respond if we do get a winter kill? Do we do stocking? Do we not stock? If we are stocking, what are we stocking? All those questions would get rolled up into this plan to understand how to manage this lake on a holistic basis. All that information would feed into a capital improvement plan. So basically, it would be a separate capital improvement plan that could get adopted into the district's plan, right? And you can kind of pick and choose. It's kind of a laundry list, but that would really guide what would go on in the overall management plan and put that together. And of course, we have to have a public input process, right? We don't want to do this in a vacuum. We want to make sure we understand the concerns of the lake users and the residents. How do we address those? What can we address? What can't we address? What's a reasonable expected outcome and what maybe the lake doesn't support, and really working through a lot of those issues. So that takes some time. So as was mentioned before, if we were to do that, this is a laundry list. This is if we were to do everything that we are thinking of right now, it does come out to a fairly pricey plan for a relatively small lake at $156,000. And so what we did was we tried to line out for you some of the specific pieces. So if you were to do the chloride management BMPs, we could pull that out. Or if you said, we don't really want to look at shoreline management right now, we could pull that out. Or we really want to just focus on the hydrology piece, you could pull that out. So it's really, this is a line item laundry list of all the pieces that go together. But just recognize you're always limited. If you only do one piece, you only understand that piece. We don't understand the impacts on some of the others, right? So that's why we tried to line this up in the way that we did. The other thing we really wanted to do was to put together some really good information that is informative and some kind of different types of handouts and figures. And so this is just an example of something that the city of Edina is currently using as a part of their clean water strategy. And BAR is working with Edina on this, but these are the types of figures that we could get out there to say, okay, let's put a vision together for your lake. What does it look like in a healthy condition? What does your shoreline look like? What does the outlet look like? All those types of things. They put together these nice lake report cards where they do cross sections, so we could really use that to vision for what the plant community could look like, what it should look like. They put together a really nice history of management in the lake and a timeline down here. And then they did some figures of some of the other stressors that are in there, whether it be nutrients, invasive species, curly leaf pondweed. So these were some of the things that we envisioned coming out of this. So it's not just a plan and a report that you read, but it really has some information for the residents in the watershed to understand. Again, priority pollutants, this is just more just giving you a sense of the types of visioning that we had for some of the outcomes. And obviously we would work with district staff to develop these. They already do a lot of really great outreach in these types of fact sheets. We're just looking to build on those and add value to those. So that's all I really have to present. I just wanted to give you a high level overview and I'm available to answer questions at this point.
Mr. Bischoff, I do have a question on the chloride. Do we track chloride in the lakes in our watershed district?
President Ziegler, managers, yes, we do. And the last year has been a very alarming trend, especially throughout the Purgatory Creek watershed. So chloride is knocking at our door right now. Granted, last year was particularly snowy year, but the general trend has been upward over the last 4 or 5 years. So, yes.
And it seems like some lakes, specifically this one, which have roads on 2 sides, they maybe more susceptible than some other lakes that are have BMPs or something separating the road runoff from the lakes themselves.
Yeah, Mr. President,
Um,
a direct source is always problematic, and it really has also to do with what the density of your roads are and the overall watershed. Everything's plumbed right into a storm sewer system. So if you have really dense roads or really dense parking lots in your watershed, that can deliver an awful lot of chloride to a lake system.
Right. Thank you. Are there any other managers have questions or comments at this time?
Yes, Mr. President.
Manager Cook?
Address the question I was raised about the cost. Let me just say that my rough calculations would be is that for I think the 5 significant lakes, just add them up. The cost that this district is proposing to pay for a piece of land that has nothing to do with our water resources. We could do a plan like this for at least 5 major lakes for just 1 year's cost. And I think we need to reconsider the spending money on a project that has nothing to do, well, I won't say nothing, but marginally something to do with our water resources in this case. And I think the public should look at this and weigh in what's more important is to fix our lakes and manage our lakes or buy a piece of upland property, which despite what some have said, which is contrary to what was said previously when permits were issued for that property, it will not have a negative impact if done according to our rules. So, why should we be spending a lot of money solving a problem that doesn't exist? Rather, we should be spending our money to solve issues like with Duck Lake, Lotus Lake, Mitchell Lake, Lake Riley Lake, and Lake Susan, Rice Marsh Lake. We have them all. Like it said, for the cost, for just 2 years worth of cost, I'll even move up 2 years of cost. We could provide all of these lake management plans for all the lakes that I mentioned, just with 2 years worth of spend on the piece of property at Noble Hills, which, as I've already said, does not add to the, well, one, I don't think it's in our purposes. It doesn't do anything more than what our rules would do as far as water quality. So I do have a question, Mr. Bishop. I wasn't quite clear. Do we have a similar plan on other lakes? I mean, similar plan to what you would be proposing as an option here under this?
Mr. President, Manager Cook, no, we don't have a comprehensive plan with all these pieces. A lot of the data are available for these different pieces, but there's never been a plan where it sews it all together. So let's take like Lotus Lake. There's a UAA that looks at the watershed loading and all those pieces. And then there's an aquatic plant management plan, but there's really not, and that addresses somewhat shoreline conditions, but then there's not a shoreline plan. So the idea here is to zip them all together so that we're looking at it holistically and making decisions about all those different pieces.
Well, just continue, Mr. Bishop. I certainly understand. I think if, all things being equal would be a laudable goal, but a laudable goal for each and every one of our lakes in the district. For all the reasons I just got done mentioning, I think it's a good approach, but, we have a number of lakes that need this as much or perhaps more, than Duck Lake, and one with major water bodies, I will call them, not to denigrate Duck Lake on that basis, but I think this is a good approach, but it's not just a one lake approach. I don't think that's the right approach, and I guess what I would look for is to come back with some stage approach that over a series of years we could have these studies produced for at least all of our major lakes, because I think they all need it. I mean, I like the holistic approach, But to pick out Duck Lake, I'm not sure is the right lake to pick out. And I think before we would say to go to Duck Lake, we need some kind of analysis as to where we get the most bang for the buck in performing these. And maybe they need to be scheduled over a series of years. So I would be looking for somebody to come back with a plan to do something like this for all of our significant lakes over some period of time. Or, perhaps to be done by the end of our 10-year plan cycle. Just as an example. So I yield back.
Thank you. Do any of the other managers have questions or comments?
President Ziegler.
Yes.
So, Joel, I do have a question for you. Is it possible, because I know that shallow lakes have many things in common, is it possible for us to come up with some sort of a template for a shallow lake to do a study like this and a template for a deep water lake? And then over time, our staff actually works on filling those spots in that we need as we have time and money?
Yeah, I think that's a great approach. I think, a lot of the issues are going to be the same, but then you still have to do the work itself. I mean, your staff are already doing the shoreline assessments themselves, and we would just help with the data analysis, and we certainly could come up with a template for what types of what you look for in terms of doing that. Your staff has always been really involved in the aquatic vegetation management, doing all the monitoring, providing those data, doing a lot of the identification of AIS control. So I really do see that as the path forward is to integrate with your staff and being able to do that kind of stuff. With that said, some of the other pieces like nitrogen and chloride would be, I don't have the template yet. That is the advantage of doing a duck lake, is that it's small watershed. It's a little bit easier to go through that process first to kind of figure that out than taking on a big behemoth of a watershed that might be like Lake Riley or something like that. So yeah, I think that's a great idea, and we're happy to support developing those templates. And I really see like some of that visioning work. Once we get some templates on how to do that, that's certainly something that I think the district could take the lead on for future lakes with a template.
And Terry, what do you think of it?
That would be fantastic. I mean, we would, staffing becomes the issue, but yeah, a lot of the data we are already collecting. We do have some expertise in-house. And another thing to be thinking about, the UAAs, we do have money set aside for UAAs. They would need to be updated regardless, and a lot of that information would go into this. So there are efficiencies that can be gained as well in other areas beyond just creating a template. But yeah, I had thought about that when we first met and started talking about a reference lake, and when those reference lakes work for, Silver Duck, Mitchell, Rice Marsh Lake.
Right.
And yeah, that could be a question to be answered, but yes.
So in my mind, when I'm looking at the summation pages that he had at the end of the report, I'm looking at some of it and I'm thinking, well, a lot of this stuff looks like our lake management reports that we get that the public has access to. There's some things in there that I saw right away are like, well, we already have this in our lake reports. So really all we're doing is we're kind of creating a more in-depth template for the lakes that we could sort of gradually do them over time as we're gaining staff, as we're gaining time, as we get more results back from the testing that we're currently doing. Would you agree that's maybe possible?
Me or Mr. Bischoff?
That's you, Terry, because you're the guy with the people.
Yes, I think it'll depend on the level of detail that the data that needs to be collected will be. For instance, Staff Maxwell has already been doing all of the score your shores. You got a hold of another DNR template, and we now have mapped the scoring of all the shores. We're working with outreach right now of now how can we communicate this to the landowners, the riparian landowners, to get them to change it. So yes, I think there is definitely a way to try and come up with a more inclusive or overall type approach.
Well, I guess I would like the board to consider perhaps doing this after the district administrator has had some time to sort of think about a timeline, because this is a big project to take on for every lake that we have. It's a big project. So I guess I would like Administrator Jeffrey to maybe come back to us and consider maybe adding this into our 10-year plan that we work on these. So that's how I would see this going forward.
President Ziegler, managers, yeah, I guess what I would like to do then is sit down with Mr. Bischoff and Engineer Sobiak and kind of discuss, is there, maybe the categorization isn't shallow lakes. Maybe the category is some other ecotype that we're seeing, that there's enough similarities between watersheds and everything else. Is there a way we can group these into 3 or 4 subgroups and address it that way? So I think that's definitely a worthwhile task, given that if we're, this would be one of the easier ones to do, and it's 150. So it would only go up from here for other lakes. So just on an economy of scale, say, find an easier way, or not an easier way, but a more comprehensive way.
President Ziegler?
Manager Crafton.
Oh, good, you can hear me. I really think this is a great idea. I like, because we have shallow lakes. I really love this approach. I think it fits with the EHAC thing perfectly. I'm thinking, well, and I don't know how this would work, but would we have to get it set up as a capital improvement in order to be able to go out and get funding? Because like that one guy I talked to, where was he?
Yes.
But then it's in our convention. He was with Fishers and Farmers, but he was pressing me hard. He also works for DNR, and he said, well, you should call us up, and we give out grants all the time. So, and then with some of the other habitat more type sources of funding, it'd be nice to explore and see if we can get some help on this end of it. But I love the idea. Obviously, you might have to do it in phases. I like the comments that Dorothy's made and your responses, Terry, but I think this is really exciting because this is so holistic. I think it's something we need to try to figure out how to get this into what we're doing.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Yeah, to Manager Crafton's comments, this does dovetail very nicely with the EHAP. So as far as, how we would get into our plan, that would be how I foresee it going into our plan is, the EHAP is intended to look at the entire watershed, not just an end of pipe approach. So, and the lake is just as much part of the watershed as any other part of that watershed. So I would see it dovetailing nicely into that plan. Regarding funding, there are oftentimes grants available for planning exercises themselves. So I do believe we can pound the pavement and probably find some grants to help us out with this. And you actually provided me information on that gentleman you were talking about the other day. So I could certainly reach out to him, see if he has any other avenues that I could explore.
Sounds good.
Manager Duval, do you have any questions or comments?
I do. I have 2 questions. One for Mr. Bischoff. You mentioned the city of Edina. Are they using something like this as a template for their lakes? I missed the reference when you were talking about Edina. Are they doing something similar for all their lakes, or how does that compare to what we're talking about here with Duck Lake?
Mr. President, Manager Duval, it really, yes, they are doing something similar. They have an overall clean water strategy that they're developing, and lakes are a part of that. They've used a lot of different techniques over the years, using algicides and some other, herbicides for aquatic plant management. So they're trying to be more integrative in terms of that. However, it is a city stormwater plan, so it doesn't go into shoreline conditions or aquatic vegetation or some of those pieces in depth as you would as a watershed district, right? So it really was a reference of the types of information that we could add to already what Manager Pedersen was talking about, your great lake fact sheets. I was just trying to show you examples of how we could try to convey the information so that this holistic approach is well understood throughout the watershed and by the people that are living on the lakes and using those lakes.
Seems like that makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. And I have one other question here for Terry. You mentioned that we are tracking chloride in the lakes and it's rising. How do we do that, and how does that fit into this picture?
President Ziegler, Manager Duval, staff Maxwell and data collection staff collect regular samples from all of our lakes throughout the district and track those trends as they're sent in for sampling. I was actually going to talk about it in the administrator's report, the trends that we're seeing, but I could do it now if people wanted to see what we're seeing. So I will share my screen. Like how it would fit in is I would leave that to Joe, but since it is a forever chemical, we would have to look at BMPs in the watershed itself. I mean, once it's to the lake, we're not going to be able to do anything about it. So just for frame of reference, so this is the purgatory chain of lakes. This is the standard. What we are seeing is Idlewild and Starring are starting to, Idlewild consistently exceeds, Starring is starting to. Duck Lake it now shows brown, it now shows blue. So we're still well below the standard, but we are seeing that upward trend on this lake. If we go to the Riley chain of lakes, it becomes even more pronounced. So we are seeing Rice Marsh Lake, Susan are both in exceedance. Riley is down here, Lucy, and Ann. So, but in all of them, we're seeing that upward trend.
So we really only get one shot at this with our current technology.
Correct. Yes, it would be. I mean, unless you're going to start building desalination plants on lakes once it's done, yeah, we're really looking at stopping it in the watershed before it makes its way to the lakes, streams, and wetlands.
So this should be in the survey then of the lakes and of the. If we have a template, this should definitely be there.
Correct. And President Ziegler, managers, it may be an opportunity where we look at us and 9 Mile are the two watershed districts that have the chloride management plan. Right now, there's not a whole lot of teeth in it. It's really just you need to go get trained in chloride application. Perhaps. So that's, my point is this plan, much like the EHAP, isn't going to just touch capital projects. It will have to involve all three legs of our stool, the education outreach, regulatory, as well as capital projects.
Thank you.
President
Thank you.
Ziegler,
Manager Crafton?
maybe you wanted to comment first, but the Isaac One Lake's been working with PCA on what we've got those strips to test chloride. I don't know if we're using them here with us, but they also have ones for testing for nitrates. I've got a packet on that. So that's another thing that that can go into a hub, and then it can collect that data and spit back reports for us. So we'd probably want to do our own database, I think. But anyway, there are some things available that aren't too costly to be tracking some of that. The other thing is Connie Fortin, who used to be with Fortin Consulting and now is Consulting, whatever. Yeah, so she wants to talk. I connected with her. I saw her at the Water Resource Conference, and she wants to talk about roads and developing roads more for winter, and Met councils might be looking at some of this because I've participated. Well, Terry, I think you're in that too. But looking at what our roads should be in 2040 or 2050. And then MnDOT, we ran into Brian Shackleton not too long ago, and he was a manager at Minnehaha Creek for a number of years, and now he's with MnDOT looking at resilience. And he wants to talk to watershed districts a lot. So there might be some opportunities to see what we can influence or find out about in terms of curtailing the salt for some of those opportunities. I don't know, but something to pursue.
Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
a couple of follow-ups. I think it just made it all the more clear that where we should be spending our money, as opposed to where they're proposing to. But I think it's important to, I think it was over a decade ago, it might have been 2 decades ago, a biologist who lived on Lotus Lake, I remember having a discussion, and comes back to now, and she said, you know, everybody looks at phosphorus. Our real problem when it comes to lakes, particularly vegetation, is nitrogen. The problem, and I raise that because the problem is, how do you control the nitrogen getting in there? You know, people want to fertilize their lawns. That's the problem. The other problem is with chloride is, until somebody finds a way to make the de-ice roads, okay, without the chlorine that's acceptable to people, it's, you know, all we're going to do is monitor it. Because I know there's no technology other than reverse osmosis that's going to take anything out of the water when it comes to chlorine or nitrogen. So, you know, you can monitor all day long, but until science comes up with the mechanisms to control these, or the greater state, you know, decides we're going to be able to stop, or we're going to stop nitrogen, stop fertilizing, you know, stop using salts, all we can do is, you know, is monitor. So it's an exercise, but I'm not sure how effective spending of money. But I think that again, I'll say we can do this analysis on every, you know, lake that we have for what we're proposing to spend on just 2 years on a piece of property that is not, you know, lending to the benefit of our water systems. And further on that, you know, if we want to get into this borrowing mood, which, you know, I've already said that we see it in our authority, and we just go out and borrow the money, and we'll have it available and do all these studies, maybe not once, but over a couple of years, and be done with it. And at least we'll have the information for which we can go forward and actually do something if these studies can actually come up with recommendations on something to do. Why wait and drag it out for a long period of time? Just go in there and get it done so that we can start implementing solutions if there are solutions. But I fear we're going to do a lot of monitoring, or we'll spend a lot of money, but there are few solutions because science hasn't figured out the solutions. And one last point I'll make is I'm pretty convinced that the single biggest contributor to phosphorus, at least in Lotus Lake, is wake boats. And it's probably the same thing in Lake Riley. And until that's dealt with, you're going to be having a rise in phosphorus. And it's going to be, I think, to the detriment of us spending money on, you know, on treatment. So, you know, if we really want to be serious about this, we go out and get the money and we get it all done, and then we can have an action plan to see if there's something that we can do about it. But like I said, I don't know if there's anything we can do about it until science catches up. And I'm not sure I've got a significant enough science background. It's going to be tough. And even if it is, to get people or cities to adopt these other approaches, that might be alternatives is going to be very difficult. So I yield back.
Thank you. So I would say that I would like to see the chloride information on the lake reports. It seems like, getting the information out to the public is important, especially when we're going to be pushing for legislation to help manage the salt. And obviously there are some things that some cities are already doing. If you change from the rock salt to the spray-on solution, you can cut your salt use by over 50%, which it doesn't solve the problem, but it certainly would help extend the time before our lakes are so bad that they can't, freshwater fish can't survive anymore. So anyway, it would help us in the short term and give us some more time.
But President Ziegler?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's already being incorporated into the next lake fact sheet, so it's already in there.
Good, thank you.
Mhm.
And then the other thing I was going to say was on the way, having come back from the conference, a lot of the other watersheds put together these plans and then go out and look for the money from grants from the clean water funds and so on. And it seems like, they have to get a little bit down the road with the plan. And certainly if we put it together for several lakes, if not all the lakes that we know have issues, the plan, and then go look for the money. And I know we have a grant coordinator. I'm not sure if their job is just to give away money or to help us get money.
Give away
So,
money.
but maybe we can extend the description of the job description. So, because I know that's one thing the previous administrator did pretty well was work with like the University of Minnesota to get grant money. Now we also paid them for projects and stuff, but it seems like other watersheds are better than us. I mean, you look at down in is it New Prague? Not New Prague. Anyway, the Fountain Lake one where they're doing dredging and they're getting millions of dollars every year to do their dredging to actually pull out the sediment with phosphorus and everything else that's built up in the sediment and removing it from the lake. And it's still in the watershed, but then their dewatering stations can then be converted back to farmland where the phosphorus can do some good. Anyway, those were my comments. That's all I had on it. If anyone else has more, or should we move to the next item?
That's President Ziegler. That's Albert Lee. They have their own lobbyist. If I had my own lobbyist, I could get more money too.
Well, I think that's a good point, and I brought that up, and I think I'm not the only one who's brought it up, as that could help us a lot. But Albert Lee is not the only place that seems to be getting a lot more grant money than us.
Outstate, I think Manager Crafton can speak to that well. Outstate has been very well represented with grant funding of late.
Yes.
Well, Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
I agree with you that we should be trying to find somebody to find us money. I mean, I know Tom Workman at Carver County has done that work, and there are people out there, but if you don't have the people that know the people, the way to get the money, it's not going to happen. And from that perspective, I guess I don't see why the metropolitan watersheds aren't collectively doing something to get more money for the metropolitan area, because let's face it, the metropolitan area pumps in more dollars than any of them the rest of the state. So I think the metropolitan areas get to figure out, get its ducks in a row to get its share of the pie. And just the last comment on the dredging. My understanding is a lot of that dredging has to go into landfills because it has so many times has other heavy metals, etc., that aren't allowed to be spread on that. So how they got all that money down there in Albert Lee, I'm not sure. Like you said, their own lobbyists, but they're not easy solutions. And last thing I just figured out, I mean, we're looking to do a lot of work to try to figure out how to deal with all the stormwater that's being pumped in the Lotus Lake that was never pumped in there before we were basically urbanized. And I think that part of figuring out what to do in Lotus Lake should involve some type of holistic study, so we're just not pumping that when we do make these projects, we're trying to do the best to reduce adverse effects. I already mentioned the lake boat, so I yield back.
Thank you. One follow-up comment on the dredging in Fountain Lake. One of the things that they were quite upfront about is they did core samples, kind of the same way we do before we do a phosphorus treatment, or I'm sorry, alum treatment. So they knew what they were pumping out, and they knew it was safe to, and they bought a piece of farmland to set up their dewatering station. So they're not paying disposal fees. They're simply pumping the sediment to a piece of former farmland, which they fully intend of selling back for use as farmland. But one of the keys was to, do some test sampling of the sediment bottom before they even got grant money. Anyway, moving on, the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. And I believe we had one thing left, and I don't have it in my notes, item G.
President Ziegler, managers, on the consent agenda, the one remaining item is for the approval of permit 2023-036 Chipotle and Eden Prairie as presented in the board action section of the permit review board.
Thank you. Do we have any motions on this item?
President Ziegler, I'd like to move we adopt resolution 23-078, which would really just have item G, which is permit 2023-036 in it.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any questions or comments on the Chipotle permit?
Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
I'd like to move to amend that motion to make it clear that we are adopting the proposed resolutions set forth in the engineer's report.
Okay, Manager Pedersen, do you accept that as a friendly amendment?
That's fine. Sure.
Manager Dwell?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Smith, can we have a roll call vote, please, on the Chipotle permit? I didn't write down the number. Sorry.
Yes, on permit 2023-036, included in the resolution for the consent agenda. Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Excuse me. Okay, so that drops us down to the
Member reports.
well, we still have to go through the things that were pulled off the consent agenda, no?
No, President Ziegler, those move to the first item on new business.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
So, member reports. So, the Citizens Advisory Committee looks like it's the first one in the member reports.
Terry Jorgensen from the CAC is here tonight to present on the CAC report.
Yeah, good evening. Like Terry said, I'm Terry Jorgensen. I'm the other Terry with the same initials. So anyway, CAC report, I see you have that added to your agenda list or to your document list. But we do not have any motions or measures to present to the board tonight. So we're not going to cause any extended meetings. But I'm open for questions if somebody did review the agenda, or I could highlight a couple items if you'd like me to. It's up to you.
Sure, I read through it and I didn't have any questions. Did any of the other managers have questions or comments or want to hear an overview?
Ziegler?
Manager Crafton?
Yeah, I didn't have anything to add on that. We just need to add in, and maybe it's already on your agenda there, but we select somebody for the next meeting.
That's a good point. Thank you.
I'll volunteer.
Thank you, Manager Duval. So you'll when is the next meeting? Is that December still?
Yeah, the next meeting's in a couple
Next Monday.
next week on the 18th.
December 18th, correct?
Right, yeah, and I'll bring that up at the meeting that Manager Duval will be attending. And I did note on our in our meeting notes, we will be moving a couple meetings in January and February due to some holiday conflicts. And I'm pretty certain we have the protocol to do that and give out the notices, but we'll carry on with that. Otherwise, carry on.
Okay,
Very interesting meeting.
Mr.
thank you.
President,
Manager Cook?
well, point of order, I guess I'm confused. We have this resolution and did we pass that? Did I fall asleep? And if not, why did we have it where it's at? And I'm confused.
The resolution is to accept all member reports.
So should that
So
be
I believe we
after
did
reports?
that before, and then we talked about each report after the fact in the last meeting.
Yeah,
So
Mr. President,
I'm okay with going back up to the adopt resolution and doing that now that we have the Citizens Advisory Report. Is that the intent, Administrator Jeffrey?
President
Since
Ziegler,
that
no,
is-
the intent was to receive all the reports and then adopt resolution 2379.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so following that, then next was, well,
Audit and Finance Committee.
yes.
Because we already did see Tom volunteered.
Okay, so the audit.
Ziegler,
Oh,
you want,
Manager Crafton.
do you want me to speak to that a little bit? No.
Yes, that would be good.
Okay. So basically, this is report that we've got of the meeting was on October 31st meeting. And we stepped through all the different steps for the internal controls essentially, but how we tied out and reconciled everything for the report for the meeting that when we reported to the full board. So that was the main gist of what we did. We know that we still need to spend some time on the policies that go to the governance manual. So we just haven't had time to do that yet. So we spent quite a time discussing the other steps when we had the meeting. So, Tom, is there anything else you want to add that we are thinking of doing?
No, I don't think so. I think that touches on it.
Okay, before we have further discussion, can we have a motion on this item?
I think it's part of that resolution to accept all of no, yeah.
Correct.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm still a little confused here.
So President Ziegler, I'll move that we adopt resolution 23-079 to receive the member reports, because now we've heard them.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion on member reports?
Yes, Mr. President, I think well, let's put it this way. If we have a governance committee, I think they need to go and look at this process and procedure, because number one, it's confusing, I think, beyond belief. The process, in my view, best management practice is there are reports, you adopt the reports, and what we've done then is provide for a discussion after we've received, not adopted the reports, I'm sorry, that's the wrong word, wrong verb, received the reports. So I'd like to see the governance committee figure that out and get the process and procedure down so that we can proceed, forward, because I have questions and comments. I want to know when to do those. I've also submitted a manager's report, which is down the list. I think we need to figure out a way to combine those two so that we have a process that makes sense, logical on that basis. So that's what I have to say to that, but I do have some comments on the account audit and finance whenever that is appropriate.
Now is a good time.
Well, so the question I have is, it says that whoever walked through these various steps, do we have written policies on all of our accounting processes and procedures? So that's my number one question.
The business regular managers, what is in the government's manual are our financial policies.
Well, I've said before that, I have provided previously revisions to them. I've provided also proposed procedures for entering claims, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know where they went, but if all we have is what's in the governance manual, is my opinion that they are wholly inadequate in order to have good internal controls. To have good internal controls, you need to have written procedures as to who does what when, and it not be oral passing it on, because one of the reasons for the procedures is for enable the auditors to be able to verify if you've been following your procedures, assuming that they believe that they are adequate internal procedures, which is one of the things that they're supposed to be looking at when they're doing the audit. And the second thing is, it's always the issue of the next person up, so that the next person in line, if they have to take over this job, they have the adequate policies and procedures that they can jump right in and take over that position. And maybe I was spoiled by being in the military, but we always had what we call SOPs for everything. And so no matter who it was, they could have one place to go and had the instructions. So quite frankly, I think we need to have policies and procedures much more robust than what's in the government's manual. As I've already said, I provided significant areas of input for those, and quite frankly, lacking the policies, I don't see how the auditors can even do an audit. And if they don't change that, I have full intentions of going to the state auditor. And this might be unfortunately happening to a bunch of watershed districts, but this would not be what you would fall within generally accepted accounting or auditing principles. So with that, I yield back.
Thank you. So I believe we're going through receiving the reports, and then we're going to vote at the end, at least at this meeting. So the next is manager reports. Manager Cook, I see you submitted one written, which is great. Do you have any comments on that, or does that stand on its own?
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I think it's fairly straightforward, although I've abbreviated it, you know, at our hourly rate of whatever it is, $14 and some cents an hour. I didn't probably put as much time into making it as readable as I could have, but you know, I've expressed serious concerns, one about our IT policies or lack thereof, particularly now that we have AI. You know, all the talk when I attend these conferences is you need to have a policy with regarding AI, whether it's internal use or your contractors, et cetera. You need to have an AI policy. That's how you're going to deal with it, one, use it, et cetera, et cetera. I don't have to say any more of that. The other thing is you know, with security, to my knowledge, we've never had a session of the governance to have their security measures explained to us, and I think that's a failure. I don't want to end up walking into a situation where we've had a hack or something, and people may not believe that we get hacked, but some people don't have anything better to do, and they'll hack about anything there is. In my report, you'll see that I continue to bring to the point that we are not following the open meeting law as we should. We are also, I'm not getting, in my opinion, adequate responses for Data Practices Act requests. I also mentioned that as far as HR is concerned, I believe that we need a consultant, because in my view, based on what I've been told, none of us, including the HR committee, have the experience or requisite information, training, education to adequately know or understand where we should be with regarding, you know, HR matters. You know, there's there's at least one significant HR law coming into effect as of January 1, and I heard nothing about how that is going to be implemented, and I would think that would have been a number one source of issues. Also, there's significant changes made to pay and leave issues. I've heard nothing. You're going to not receive any report regarding how we're going to be addressing and complying with that law, although that one may be 2025. I don't remember which one. But then again, I'm not sitting on the committee. But I think for purposes of this, I've covered a number of the items, and I ask you to review the list and to consider requiring that we address these issues as we go forward, especially into the new year. So with that, I yield back.
Thank you. Manager Crafton, do you have a manager's report?
No, not really. I've been attending a lot of conventions lately, so. I was at the Soil and Water Conservation District in England. I went for a while on Monday, and I went yesterday and today. So it's interesting to see the contrast between. They've got tons of money coming in from the state, and they're trying to figure out, okay, since the money's here now, what capacity do we need to be able to spend that? We're doing just the opposite. We know where we want to go. It's interesting, but yeah, I've been busy.
Thank you.
Mr. President.
Manager Cook.
I just have a brief comment based upon what Manager Crafton said. So I think it's important that we seriously consider getting a lobbyist to get money for our projects, but particularly if this district wants to go ahead with this land acquisition. Last number I heard, it was over $2 billion is sloshing around in a big piggy bank out there. we need to get somebody to help us get these dollars, because as I said before, I don't think it's fair to the taxpayers in our watershed district to be footing that kind of a bill for that property, which contrary to what some have said, I don't believe meets our criteria for doing that. And I don't believe it falls as a project. So to me, the best way to solve the problem is go out there and get the money so there's no cost to our taxpayers. I yield.
Thank you.
President Ziegler?
Manager Crafton?
Yeah, I guess I just want to respond to that a little bit. A lot of its buzzer is really committed to get sending money to the SWCDs. The capacity, although they just had legislation that passed this year that should help them out, so that should be consistent funding for them, I believe. But they also get technical service money through the ag side and other money from NOCF. So a lot of it's just vouchers by us to send money in other places, and they restricted enough of them and actually can get, because they're a lot of one watershed, one plans all over the state, so they're really putting priority on funding a lot of those out, greater Minnesota issues. So we're doing the best we can. Those of us representing watershed districts to try and fund them money this way. It's not always easy. That's it.
Thank you. Manager Patterson?
I'm cognizant of the time, and I don't really have anything that's pressing. We have a lot of things left on the agenda. Thank you, President Ziegler.
Thank you. Manager Duval?
Same comment as Manager Pedersen. We have a lot left on the agenda and nothing pressing.
Okay, so I did have the opportunity to interview with 4 different candidates for the Minnesota watersheds new lobbyist team, and we went with the most expensive one, but they were also the best, or at least they interviewed the best. But I believe that there may be some notes available from Jan if you want to see. If nothing else, Mr. Smith actually recommended the team that we ended up going with, and he may be able to help us a little bit on understanding if they could carve out something a little smaller than what Minnesota Watersheds is asking for. Basically we have some projects and we need money, and that's a little simpler than Minnesota Watersheds has some other more complicated issues. Let me see. So I think in the interest of time, I'll cut it there, and there is a seminar thing that I'm going to listen into tomorrow, but it's probably too late to sign up for anybody else now. So I'll see if I can get access to the video and send that to Administrator Jeffrey for distribution. So the next is the administrator report.
President Ziegler, managers, what I wanted to talk to you about was the chloride trends in the district. We've done that already, so that's all I have at this time.
Thank you. So the next item after that is legal. And I don't know if there's 2 segments of the legal report, or if it's, I know we wanted to do closed session for part of it.
That's the item. Mr. President, at this time, we'd recommend that the board adopt a motion to go into a closed session for purposes of receiving a briefing, confidential briefing from legal counsel concerning litigation strategy in the matter of Cook versus Riley Purgatory Bluff Creek Watershed District.
Okay, so I'll make the motion to go into closed session. Do I have a second?
Second.
So I have a motion and a second. And as I understand it, because one of the managers is on the other side of the aisle, I'll call it that, on this one, that they wouldn't be in the session, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Well,
So Administrator Jeffrey, do we have someone to,
Mr. President, we'll first
We need to
vote on the,
vote.
oh, yes, okay. I'm sorry.
Point of
Can we
order.
have a roll call vote?
Excuse me, point of order.
Manager Cook?
So I have a discussion on this. Well, I'm not sure there's technically any reason, to be honest, if you why I would be excluded. I know why what would jump right in your face is being that. But the problem with that is there no representation of Carver County. So what I suggest, if you're going to do this, we need to think about a means so that Carver County has its representation in this matter. So I'll say.
Mr. Smith, do you have a procedure you'd like to use going forward here?
just a roll call vote on the motion.
Okay. Please proceed.
Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
No.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1.
We will start putting people into the waiting room. So President Ziegler, that will bring us to the consent agenda items that were pulled, the first one being the November staff report.
And just so I'm clear, we're going to adopt the resolution at the end after
Oh,
we
yeah.
talk about. Yeah, okay.
Right, so you're correct, we should adopt 2379 now.
2378.
79.
Oh,
Remember-
yeah, okay. Okay.
And we moved and seconded, so I think it's just a vote.
Okay. Very good.
You like me to call you roll?
Yes.
Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Oh, the November staff report.
Okay, so the resolution is to cover all of the reports, is that correct?
That is correct.
So do I have a motion on adopting resolution 23-078?
No. President
sorry.
Ziegler, we just voted on 2379, which was the resolution to receive all the member reports.
Right, but we still have to go back and all the consent items that were moved to
Right.
new business.
So that's
So
the November staff report.
yes, but are we gonna approve them all at
Individually.
once or one at a time?
One at a time.
Okay, so then the next one is to receive the staff report. Do we have a motion on that item?
Move that we accept the November staff report,
I'll second.
Mr. President.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Do we have questions or comments on the November staff report?
Yes, Mr. President.
Manager Cook?
Well, I have a couple of questions, a couple of comments. If you go on page 6, I think this is the first time in a long time where we've had any discussion about groundwater conservation, and I'm not sure well, it says it provided a scope. I'm not sure that we agreed to start doing groundwater, and if we're gonna talk about this, I think this should be part of some type of a workshop where we can figure out what we're proposing. And the reason I question whether we should even be dealing with groundwater is that by and large, my understanding is that, you know, the cities are the big users. And I understand we don't have any control over the big users. And I'm not sure how or why we would be in the groundwater conservation, business. And just a bunch of, so, you know, if we're going to cover this, I think we should cover it in a work session and have an explanation as to what the issues are, why we'd want to do this, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll move on. That's just a comment, unless somebody wants to, on page 7, I know this is a little comment. There was one at the top there. It says the herbicide was extremely effective at controlling. I would have asked before about other results. Can we avoid the adjectives and see if there isn't some objective data that we can utilize to say, something is effective instead of saying it's effective? I don't know what that means. Does it mean that we went from, 10 plants per square foot to 0? It killed them all. There's no object. So if that's possible going forward, maybe this one it isn't, but some objective standard by which to make a conclusion whether something was successful or not.
Those are all in the lake management report.
I'm sorry.
Those are all included in the lake management report that's put out at the end of the year.
Okay, but that is doing a good one. It's at the end of the year and you're making a statement in the report. But we can move on on that basis. It doesn't help me just by reading that. And, opportunity projects. Can you explain what the 2022-2023 WBI funding, et cetera, is all about?
President Ziegler, Manager Cook, that's the watershed-based implementation funding. It's part of the One Watershed, One Plan. But since the metro area is not subject to the One Watershed, One Plan, we rely on our own watershed plans. So the way Bowser has distributed funds to the metro area for this is for what they call a convene session to be held. And that is where all of the local road authorities and municipal governments that are within a watershed boundary get together and select a project from their plan, whether it be the city plan, the county groundwater plan, or the watershed district plan to fund and do. So this was one that Minnetonka had identified in Purgatory Park, south of Scenic Heights Elementary School, where we've already done some work, and that funding is going to Minnetonka to address this. The funding had closed, but they had funding left available, so they reopened it for this project.
Okay, thank you. On the page 8 on the wetland issue, the restoration order, could you help summarize where we're at? Are they doing something, required to do something on that?
Yeah, President Ziegler, Manager Cook. Yeah, so this one's been very convoluted. There are 2 property owners involved. One of them is very agreeable to restoring the property. The other is trying very hard not to. They have a consultant on board who has pushed back against our regulatory requirements, which is to say that they need to model flows through the stream because they would rather just put a control structure at the outlet. The city, SWCD, and DNR are working on a restoration order, or have working with the violators on a restoration order, and they're concurrently working with us to make sure that their restoration is compliant with our rules. So it's fairly complicated for all of those reasons, but it is moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, I appreciate that. That's helpful. So on page 9, you talk about Bluff Creek reaches 5 and 6, and I'm trying to get these in perspective because I think 2 of our items deal with Bluff Creek, and I take it 5 and 6 are different than the Upper Bluff Creek. Can you help me out on that? Understand those distinctions?
But yeah, President Ziegler, Manager Cook. So this is one of the things we want to change. Before naming was always Upper Bluff or Middle Bluff, and what does that mean? How upper is upper? How middle is middle? So this is the same as the Upper Bluff. These are the Galpin Boulevard crossing area.
So these are the areas that are discussed or covered in the 2 resolutions coming up. Is that right?
That is correct.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I just couldn't
Apologize for the confusion.
No, not your fault. Let's see. I'm sorry, I just got a page through here. So 11, I keep getting Upper Riley and Upper Bluff confused, but on page 11, second item there. So we're still working on a cooperative agreement to figure out how we're going to work with the city to do work on Upper Riley.
That is correct, and as well as the private landowners along that corridor.
Okay. But we haven't ordered a project per se. We're still working to get an agreement to do something.
We're still getting the land right agreements. The project has been ordered, but construction has not been ordered. We have not gone out for bid or anything at this time. So we are in the design phase. Design is fairly well completed. We just need to get the rights. One of the bigger confusions was there is an area that Chanhassen utilizes right now on their public works facility for their boneyard where they store their materials. And that is immediately adjacent to the creek, and it is in the floodplain. So they were talking about building a decant facility, which we talked about a while ago. That sticker price was pretty big. So we're working on a smaller one. So that's kind of been one of the harder pieces to work through, what to do with that area.
Well, one of the reasons I raised the question, it's going to be what I'm going to raise about 82 and 83. It just seems to me that until we have our ducks in a row and we decided this is what the project's going to be, it seems then you would order the project, because we dotted the i's, we got it all lined up, all ready to go, and then we would issue the order. Because it seems to me the order is the last thing, because we would, go out and we get that far, we go out and get bids. I mean, the word order is a little misleading to me. I mean, I don't understand. How much does it encompass? That's what I'm trying to get my arms around.
Yeah, everything up to preparing bids is what the ordered project encompasses.
So it's ordering to move forward with work, but it's not actually ordering the contractor of the work.
That is correct. That is correct. Yep, that is correct.
Yeah, okay. Try to keep that in mind when you're doing that. On 11, maybe this I think is my last one on 11. St. Hubert's, I noticed the one part, I think it says it's closed out, but it seems to me like we're keeping on doing something on this project, and is it fitting within so my questions are, is it fitting within the original scope? But the bigger question is, are we getting our payments?
Yes, we will, President Ziegler, Manager Cook. Yes, we will be getting our. I just met with St. Hubert on Monday of this week and the contractor, because their subcontractor has been non-responsive. So the contractor is going to go out, replace the trees, and we'll invoice St. Hubert's at that time.
Okay. Well, my more concern is that this curriculum thing keeps going, and I don't know you know, are there lanes for it, and does it gonna come to an end, or is it ongoing? And so maybe some other time you can give you know, a briefing on where it's at. So, and the reason I bring it up is because if we agree to distinct increments, I mean, that's one thing. But I just get the impression, maybe I'm totally off base, that it's kind of like this creeping thing that just kind of keeps on going, and I don't see an end in sight. So we don't have to debate it any further, but maybe bring us up to speed at a workshop or something where this project has been and is, and if it's going to go any further. So we don't have to take any more time you know, tonight on that basis. Let me just check. That's it. Thank you very much. And if it's appropriate, I'll move that we, or do I need to move that we adopt this, or not adopt?
Yeah, I believe it's already been
this,
moved.
including
I-
the
I
prior
think we-
resolutions.
I think once we get through with the other reports, then we can adopt resolution 23-078.
No,
Oh, I'm sorry, not that one. We don't have one.
no, there's no resolution for these.
Okay,
So,
Okay,
so I think it'd be appropriate that I move to receive this report.
and I'll second the motion to receive the staff report.
Mr. President, that's been moved by Manager Duval and seconded by Manager Pedersen.
Okay, sorry. So, is there any further comments, or can we go to a roll call vote? Hearing no comments, can we have a roll call vote, please?
On acceptance of the November staff report, Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
So the next item then is receiving the engineer's report. Do we have any motions on this item?
President Ziegler?
Manager Crafton.
Yes, I'll move that we receive the November engineers report.
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Do we have questions or comments on the engineer's report?
Mr. President, if I may.
Manager Cook?
I just have on page 2 of page 5. I've raised this before. My concern, this item C at the top, miscellaneous pre-application calls, emails, etc. And again, I forget the answer to this, but are we tracking this so that we are getting adequately compensated if an application comes in? Or are we losing a lot of time and effort up front?
President Ziegler,
Yes.
Manager Cook. With respect to these calls and emails, most of the time they're 10, 15 minutes at most. They're pretty quick. So we do not track those individually to tie them back to a potential future permit. Those I think it's really good public relations to provide that service to the developers in the cities to answer those questions early on. I think it helps save time in the long run to address them before the submittals come in. Otherwise, it essentially helps eliminate at least one round of back and forth with them.
Yeah, but Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
I don't disagree that, it's a good thing to answer the questions. All I'm saying is that, I think I give you an example. Maybe I'm wrong on this, but what's the bank of the bank that has
Core
the
Trust.
sinking part?
Core Trust.
Okay. Well, maybe it's just my phony recollection, but it seems like they keep coming back and coming back and coming back. And then I think they finally submitted a permit application, but my recollection was before that, it seemed like we were spending a lot of time on that project. Maybe my perception is just wrong, but it's your President
Ziegler, Manager Cook. Prior to them resubmitting their permit application for that the second go around. My recollection is it was less than an hour that we spent answering questions.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. Then I think it's the last item that I have is, second to last. Continuing data management, sampling, et cetera. Is that something that, our staff could be doing? I'm going to think we would be doing it, nothing personal, but cheaper than a bar.
President Stigler, Manager Cook. Currently, the Equus database is something that we receive the data directly from RMB, and it's imported in. It is something that I know our staff at BAR do work closely with district staff in coordinating and making sure the data is input correctly and reviewed. It is something that I think the district could, if they wanted to, take on and acquire Equus and get familiar with how to operate the database?
I just think that would be something to consider, and if it doesn't make economic sense, it doesn't make economic sense. But if it does, I think it's something to be worth considering. So thank you for your answer to that. And excellent work. So to consider, it would seem to me that the better practice would be not doing out of scope tasks to support the project, but coming to us and amending the tasks. And if we have to build in a fudge factor, that the administrator can deal with, that would be fine. But doing things out of scope, I don't think is a good practice. So I'll leave it at that and hope that you and the administrator would work through my concerns on that. We're going to be talking about Bluff Creek later, right? Okay, we're talking about that. And that is it. Thank you. I yield back.
Do any other managers have any questions or comments on the engineer's report? Hearing none, I believe we had a motion and a second already, so we can go to the roll call vote. Is Mr. Smith on?
Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager DeVal,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Siegler.
Yes.
The motion carries 5-0.
Okay, the next item is the receiving the November regulatory report. Do we have any motions on this item?
I move we accept the November regulatory report.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any questions or comments on the regulatory report?
Yes, Mr. President.
Manager Cook?
So I have 2 points on the, I'm sorry, just give me one minute. It would be helpful, at least for me, if the inspection report could include something along the effect of, the next steps or what was the result. So, for example, a non-compliance, we used to have it, if I recall correctly, there was a column or a place that said, contacted, the contractor, and it was fixed or not fixed. And I think it would be helpful to see that rather than just saying, here's the problem. If there is a solution or it's been handled, I think it would be good to know that. And then similarly for the violation summary, it kind of says what's happening, but in these cases, it's kind of like, well, with the NOVs or NOPVs, like, where are we going? What's the next step? So we can discuss if there's ways that we can, move these along, just like the no response for, what is it, the last one on, is it the second page? So those are my comments. If we can somehow add, you know, what was done, follow up, or if what it would be next steps, in some of those cases, particularly with the NOPDs. So that's it. I yield back.
Okay, any other questions or comments by other managers? Hearing none, Mr. Smith, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, the next item that was pulled from the consent agenda is to approve the after the fact permit 2022-012. Is that correct? Yes, okay.
That is correct, yes.
So that's the 7300 Laredo Drive as presented in the board action section of the permit review report. Do we have any motions on this item?
Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
I'll move that we adopt the proposed resolution set forth in the permit application review with the following change. And that's in the second paragraph where it starts out, resolved that the application for, and at that point, I would insert an after the fact, and then it would continue permit. And then, so that's my motion.
So I'll second that motion and ask Scott if he has any opinion.
It's actually President Ziegler. It's actually a Matt Nicolai.
Oh, okay.
Hammered your name again. You got to spell it differently.
Mr. Sobiek did look a little surprised.
I think that insertion of that language would be fine. I don't see any reason not to.
Okay.
And Mr. President, I have one question on that.
Manager Cook?
And I noticed on page 3 of 5, it talked about the deposit, but I wasn't clear. Are we, and I know they got to put down financial assurances, but since this is after the fact, are we collecting for our added, you know, time and effort? I believe that we adopted that as for after the fact permits.
President Ziegler, managers, but we'll have to go back to the MS4 front and look, but I believe, yeah, that's a good question. I don't think I'll have to go to the MS4 permit and see how much time ended up spent on this, because we do have legal time on this. Yeah,
So,
I want to amend the motion to include recoup of time, because I do know that Smith Partners spent a great deal of time on this.
Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
I move to amend my motion along the lines that Administrator Jeffrey said, which was to add language to the effect that it would be subject to the payment of the expenses incurred by the district in connection with this after the fact permit.
And I'll agree with that, as I believe I was the one who seconded. Do we have any other questions or comments on this permit? Hearing none, can we have a roll call vote, please, Mr. Smith, on permit 2022-012?
Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, I think that brings us to new business. Is that
Nope,
correct?
this President Ziegler, this is the one item that you were missing on yours. This is pay application number 7 for the Rice Marsh Lake Water Quality Improvement Project in the amount of $4,562.
Do we have a motion on this item?
I move that we approve pay application number 7 for $4,562.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any questions or comments on this item?
Mr. President, I do.
Manager Cook?
The reason I pulled this, and maybe it predates, I believe, the board's action. So it still has notes that I guess the retainage is a rate of 5% until completion equals 50%. Does this, and I realize this is going to be almost all done, right, except for $500. But does this predate our agreement to basically there's going to be, the maximum amount withheld until the contract was basically closed out?
President Ziegler, Manager Cook, you are correct. This contract with Meyer Construction actually predates that direction by the board. So going forward, it will follow what you said, Manager Cook. This predates that.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'm finished. Thank you.
Okay, we had a motion and a second. Do we have any further comments on this item? Can we have a roll call vote, please, Mr. Smith?
Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries
Now-
5-0.
Now you're to new business.
Okay, the first item of new business is to receive the November treasurer's report. We have a motion on this item.
President Ziegler?
Manager Kraft,
Yes, I'd like to move acceptance of the treasurer's report.
I'll second.
we have a motion and a second. Do we have any questions or comments on the treasurer's report?
Yes, Mr. President, if I may.
Manager Cook?
So a couple things jumped out at me. If we go to the second page under the visa activity, I noticed an awful lot of Adobe subscriptions, and some of them look like total amounts, and my understanding was that Adobe was now going to so much per month. Maybe you can pay it in advance. I didn't know if that was if that's the case, but is there a reason we're purchasing so many?
President Ziegler, Manager Cook, to your first point, yes, you can go month to month. It's a discount if you order it on an annual fee. Some people have Adobe Professional. Some people have lesser versions of Adobe. So every one of our employees has Adobe, depending on whether they're doing education outreach or things they need professional, they do that. A lot of our contract signatures are through Adobe signatures. For instance, the grant agreements are through. So that's why we have so many of those. I did look into an enterprise license. It's not quite, we don't quite have enough employees where the enterprise license becomes the cheaper option.
Okay, thank you for that. Maybe I missed it, and I haven't been in the office for a while. I noticed that there was an aquarium light. Do we now have an aquarium?
President Ziegler, managers, yes, we've had an aquarium now we got it. Steph Nikolai found an injured painted turtle, and that kind of started the. We've had crayfish in there. We've got a few fish. Josh Maxwell will bring home stuff. So yes, we have an aquarium right by the entrance to the kitchen.
Okay, I must have missed that, thank you. Then we have this Wild Ones Prairie, spent $1,000 in public information booklet. What does that cover?
President Ziegler, managers, it is a publication that Wild Ones puts out that offers guidance for homeowners as to what plants would be appropriate for what areas. We've been using those at tabling events or other things, just as door prizes or generalized information.
Okay, thank you. Now I come down to the real business. So I'm kidding, but it is real business. And we had talked about the possibility of having electronic payments. Have we done anything more on that?
President Ziegler, Manager Cook. I have not done anything beyond talking to a few watershed districts that utilize Bill Me. I forget the name of it. It was on my list to look into, but I thought we would loop it in with the treasurer or with the Audit and Finance Committee's revision of the financial portion of the governance manual.
Okay, thank you. Can you just summarize that we have the due from other governments, 247,000? Can you recall who owes us? Or is that grant money, or is that, what is that?
Yep, that is due from governments. That's going to be let's see, what will that be? Chanhassen owes us money. Amy, I know that you're struggling with your internet connection. I'm trying to remember who the other ones are yet to invoice. I would have to go back and look at the audit report from last year.
Okay, that's fine. I'm just trying to figure out what it's
Well, yes,
money they owe us for we advanced or something like that, or
yeah, they're
projects.
typically projects that we've done and paid the costs initially, and they need to pay us back, or projects that are in the docket and they're going to be paying us for.
Okay. The other thing mentioned here for the Audit and Finance Committee, we have this, but my understanding was, and this is why I raised the question about policies and procedures, is that we are not going to include, money we hadn't received, but we're going to include bills we owed. So I just like the Audit and Finance, or if I have the name right again, to look into that. So, what we have for balance sheet is matching our policies, whatever that may end up being. Let's see. I think I have much more. I'm just going to. Oh, so one question I have is that if you go on page 1 of 1, which was the Treasury's report check register, down at the bottom, we got 2 credit card payments. And it struck me as a little odd, 2 credit card payments in 1 month.
823.
Under electronic payments, they're kind of the third block from the bottom.
Yep. So President Ziegler, managers, one of those is we had bought a computer for the new staff, and it was paying it down so that we could have not run into the same issue we ran into last time when reserving the rooms. Just turned out we didn't have rooms to reserve. So.
Okay, I get it. Thank you. Just going down my list. Okay, so question that I have on page it's 1 of 10, which is the 2023 budget status report through. First of all, it says through 11/20. So first issue is, I thought we always used to be a month behind, and now this is not a month behind, it's the immediately preceding. So I mean, I'm just curious as why it's changed, and the reason I asked the question is that I think it's pretty hard to get an accurate set of books for the immediately preceding month, but we should have a definite handle on 2 months prior to. There's a word for that, I don't forget the word. So I'm curious as why we would do that, and because otherwise you end up with kind of fudge, I don't know, not fudge numbers, but they're not as accurate as if you've clearly closed out the month. And I think it would be hard to close out the month in a short period of time. And I think we've had talked about, or we're going to be talking about, when do we have our meetings? So it makes sense as to when we close out months or what months get reported. I raised that just for I think it's something that should be addressed. So we clearly know on a continuing basis what is the best report. We could have two reports. We could have the closed out one for 2 months before, and then we could have, our best guess report for the immediately preceding. So, I'd actually kind of prefer that, but I'm just throwing that out as it's different. And then my question here is, we go down to it's 20-01 10-year management plan. We spent am I right? We spent $120,000. No, that's revenues. No,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that is expenditures. $120,000 expenditures. What have we expended that on? And that's a lot of money for the 10-year plan, and without having seen anything. And I'm not saying it isn't legit. I just like to know what we're
I couldn't list all of this, President Ziegler, managers. The primary bulk of it has been on the EHAP program. There are other expenses in there. I could certainly get an itemized breakdown of that line if the managers.
okay. So a big part of that is the EHAP in
Yep.
that line item that we stuck
That's-
in that line item. Okay.
That's
I want to move on here. Sorry. Yeah, I see we have, and yeah, I see under there we have, and I was going down to page 4. Okay, so that's legal and engineering, but having to do mostly with that EHAP. Is that right?
I'm sorry,
I'm on 4 of 10. No, that's fine. I'm on 4 of 10. And you look at line item 4410 and 4500. Are those basically the EHAP numbers?
These are related to the grant numbers. Is that what you're asking? What these legal and engineering are for under the grant and stewardship?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I may give you the wrong number. It's under 10-year management, page 4 of 10. So,
Yeah.
is that just the EHAP we've been talking about?
I'm sorry. Yeah, that's the EHAP. That's
okay.
Yep.
Okay, I got. One thing I'd like the audit and finance to be looking at. Go to the top of page 5. I had this discussion, when we're doing about budgets, and my experience has been dealing with businesses is to make sure that the salaries are reflected in the categories where the people generally deal with. Now, this just happened to list wages that interns. That was just a cue to me. Make sure that we, for example, we're doing education outreach or whatever those categories are, that we should be attributing our best estimate of the wages paid to do that work in that category. And I'm sure you and the audit committee can figure that out. That just made me think of it, the wages interns. But the concept is to make sure that our budget line items reflect the part of the wages that have to do with it. So, I mean, probably these ones like education outreach. We have one person dedicated that seems to me to get an accurate view of how much we're actually spending on education outreach, the wages for the person, or the good estimate of the portion of the wages that person spent based on time spends on it, I think should be reflected. That gives you a true idea of what the cost of running that program is. So that's a comment. So, that's it. Thank you. I yield back.
Are there any other questions regarding the treasurer's report? Hearing none, can we have a roll call vote on receiving the treasurer's report?
Manager Crafton,
Yes, sorry.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
The next item on the agenda is payment, adoption of resolution 23-080, approving payment of the bills. Do we have any motions on this item?
President Ziegler,
Manager Crafton,
I move resolution on number 23-080 to approve the payment of the bills.
I'll second.
we have a motion and a second. Do we have any questions on this item or comments? Hearing none, can we have a roll call vote, Mr. Smith?
Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, I think the next one is adopting, well, we don't have to adopt the resolution, but we have to have the final budget and levy discussion.
President Ziegler, managers, yes. So if there are members of the public that wish to speak on the adopted budget and levy, they may at this time. There is a resolution for if the managers choose to change the budget and or levy at this time, we would use that. Otherwise, there's no need for a resolution.
Do we have any members of the public who would like to speak on the adoption of the final budget and levy?
Not seeing any.
Okay, I don't see any either. Okay, so do we do nothing? That seems too easy.
That is correct. That is my understanding. Mr. Smith could speak to that more, but yes, we've already adopted and submitted to the county our budget and levy. If there are no changes, I would verify it with the county auditors, and that will become the budget and levy for 2024.
Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
my only comment is that if you want to use this proposed resolution as a format in the future, you might want to check the spelling in the head.
President Ziegler,
Manager Crafton?
it's just really hard to hear Manager Cook. I couldn't quite hear what he said.
Oh, I'm sorry. If you want to use this as a template in the future, you might want to look at the spelling in the heading. I believe amended is misspelled.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is adopting resolution 23-082, ordering the Upper Bluff Creek Restoration and Habitat Enhancement Project. Do we have any motions on this item?
President Ziegler, I move we adopt resolution 23-082 on Upper Bluff Creek Restoration and Habitat Enhancement Project.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any questions or comments on the resolution 23-082, Upper Bluff Creek Restoration and Habitat Enhancement Project?
Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. So this is simply ordering the design and permitting. Or excuse me, yeah, orders the design and permitting necessary. I mean, isn't this just coming up with a design and then we go further?
President Ziegler, manager. So this would be to order the design, to work with the various landowners to get land use agreements that are necessary and to prepare all the plan specifications and notices necessary to solicit a contractor, and then those bids would be brought back to the managers.
Well, I guess it's not as specific, I guess, as I would like to see it, because that was part of my confusion. I mean, I don't intend this to be ordering the project to be executed, which I understand it's not, but perhaps in the future, we'd have a little, flesh that out a little bit better. And that being said, I don't see any reason why in the future we couldn't be incorporating that task order right in this resolution. But so that's just my comments for, at least for the future.
Do we have any other questions or comments on this item? Mr. Smith, can we have a roll call vote on adopting resolution 23-083, approving task order? I'm sorry, what did I get wrong?
So resolution 23082, ordering the upper brief of.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We did vote.
So, yes, adopting resolution 23-082, ordering Upper Bluff Creek restoration and habitat enhancement.
Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, so the next item is the resolution 23-083, approving task order to develop plans for the Upper Bluff Creek restoration and habitat enhancement. Do we have any motions on this item?
I move that we adopt resolution 23-083.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments on this task order? Mr. Jeffrey, do we know what the task order number is?
It is 36B.
Right in that resolution.
Okay, Mr. Smith, can we have a roll call vote on adopting resolution 23-083, approving task order 36B to develop plans for the Upper Riley Creek Bluff Restoration and Habitat Enhancement Project?
Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, that, I think that gets us to the discussion item, eligible activities for per diem payments. Is that correct?
President Ziegler, managers know that will not be on this as the Audit and Finance Committee. That was only on the draft. I'm surprised that that's.
Oh, I'm sorry. I must have, well, I did print it. I just should have.
The Audit and Finance Committee did not meet. They canceled their meeting, and so there was no discussion had on that.
So what's next on the agenda?
Upcoming board topics: EHAP workshop, groundwater monitoring program, and Upper Riley Creek. So the EHAP workshop, and it's in the upcoming events as well. The fourth and final, although I won't say final, but of our planned series is to be held January 3rd will be the first through the end of January. We've got 4 separate ones. And then we will compile that data and start the same process with the Board of Managers to get your input on this. So that will be coming up. Likely a March workshop is what I'm thinking at this time, but we'll know more in the future. The groundwater monitoring program, we were going to bring that to you at the January meeting. We can flesh out those questions that Manager Cook had as to the purpose and scope of that project. And then Upper Riley Creek will be bringing term sheets and agreements to the board for consideration.
So when is our next meeting?
Our next meeting, that's a really good question here. Steph, that I think we would like to ask you if you would like to meet on, I believe it's January 3rd is the first Wednesday, or if you would prefer to meet January 10th, and then at that meeting, we'll set our calendar for the year.
I had us in for a workshop on December 21st. Did we put that off?
That December workshop was going to have the lake management plan.
Oh, we did it today.
So we did that tonight. Yep.
Oh, lovely. Thank you for an extra evening.
Yeah. I thought it's
Well,
Christmas.
That's gone.
Yes, that's gone.
So it's January 3rd or January 10th for the next regular meeting. Makes no difference to me.
Mr.
Doesn't
President,
make any difference to me.
Mr. President,
Manager Cook,
I move that we set our next meeting for January 10.
Okay.
At 7 p.m.
That's fine.
so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll
George?
second.
There you
Did I hear a second?
Oh,
I'll second.
oh,
Okay,
go. The manager developed did second that.
okay. Any further discussion?
Only that, Mr. President,
Manager Cook,
only that if I understood Minister Jeffrey correctly, then we will have a proposed regular or schedule of regular meetings
Correct.
at that meeting. Okay,
Yep.
and then the possibility of workshops.
Correct.
Thank you.
so I have January 10th at 7 p.m. as the next meeting.
President Ziegler,
Yes,
just a quick question. I'm thinking that with everything that staff has done, this would be back to in-person meeting, or would this be hybrid? Maybe Administrator Jeffrey wants to talk to that.
President Ziegler, managers, thanks, Engineer Sobiak. Yes, we did run a mock meeting today as a staff, and we're going to have little glitches, and I think that's going to happen with any learning curve. But we are ready to hold the meeting in person on the 10th.
Mr. President, sorry.
Manager Cook,
Mr. President.
Manager Cook.
So are we also going to be able to do it hybrid? And well, at least in light of my condition, I don't know if I'm going to want to. I don't know if we're going to have crowds or not. So,
President Ziegler, Manager Cook, yes, that was part of what we tested out today. So yes, that will be fine to be hybrid.
oh, so Mr. President,
Manager Cook,
I'd like to amend my motion that the meeting will be conducted in a hybrid manner with both in person and via the internet.
I'll agree to that change.
thank you. Was there any other questions or comments, or can we, let me see, do we need to vote on this?
Yes, there's no
Yeah.
motion.
Okay.
Mr. President,
Manager Duval,
so does that mean we'll have a audit and finance meeting the day before and the governance committee on the Friday following?
President Ziegler, Manager Duval, I think
Or not?
Yeah, I think we'll need to set a new schedule for those as well, just like we did with this. So I did send out an email to the Audit and Finance Committee members. I have heard back from one of them to find the next meeting time. And we'll do the same with the Governance Committee. And then at that meeting, adopt a schedule for the year.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments before we have a roll call vote? Mr. Smith, can we have a roll call vote on having our next meeting Wednesday, January 10th at 7 p.m.?
Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Is there anything else we need to cover that on the agenda that I don't have in front of me anymore?
I'd like to wish everyone happy holidays. And now that we aren't going to see each other until January 10th, Happy New Year. And with that, I'll move that we adjourn the meeting.
I'll second and back at you with the readings.
Okay, can we have a roll call vote on adjourning the meeting?
Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Duval,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
I'd like to also,
enjoy your families.
Good night,
Yeah.
everybody.
Thanks,
Good night.
everyone. Take care.
Good night. Thanks, Amy.
Happy holidays.
yeah,
You
happy
too, Scott.
holidays.